All right. Hello, everybody, and welcome to the September 14th, 2021 iteration of the Kubernetes SIG-Windows community meeting. As always, these meetings are recorded and uploaded to YouTube, so be sure to adhere to the CNCF Code of Conduct. Let's jump in. I don't think we really have any new announcements, but I'll add that here. I wanted to use the first part of this meeting to discuss the KEP status for 123. So we actually got all three of the KEPs that we were tracking in for 123, which is awesome. Great work, everybody, for looking at that. For the host process containers KEP, the only caveat with that was we couldn't convince Jordan Liggett that it was a good idea to update the some of the Kubernetes client libraries to be able to understand that pathing prefix that we need for host process containers. So that means things like the client Go library, searching for the service account tokens and service account credentials is not going to be as straightforward as possible. We do have a lot of demos of how to work around that issue that we'll share. But other than that, I think it was pretty straightforward. There was a lot of either suggestions or requirements to add unit tests or EDE tests to test various functionality, which I think will help improve the stability and usefulness or the ease of use of these and kind of help us understand what scenarios will and will not be supported. So I think we're kind of on track to go to beta in 123, assuming that Container D has a release in time to kind of support that. Next is the node logs. This one, we didn't really need to update the KEP, just some milestones for 123 since this was approved for an alpha release of 122. Arva and Sebastian, do any of you guys need any help with any of this? If you need any more dev resources, now might be a good time or this might be a good place to ask for help.
Yes, definitely help will be welcome. This is what I'd also posted on the Kubernetes Slack when I think someone had asked me for an update. It sort of stalled. Both me and Christian have not had cycles to work on it yet. So yes, if there are other folks interested in this, I'm definitely open to getting help here.
One other thing to note, a little bit different, this release is SIG node is imposing a soft code freeze much earlier than the normal code freeze. I think that they're wanting any implementation PRs for enhancements to be open, to have the PR open and ready for review by October 15th this year, or this release. So that is something to note. Yes, I did see the thread on Slack as well, so we can maybe try and facilitate extra help there on Slack. Okay, next is the OS field and the pod spec. Ravi, do you have anything you want to say about this? I have kind of the same question. I think that there's a lot of different pieces that this KEP is touching, and I'm wondering if you feel like you need any help in any of these areas.
I think at this point of time, I know the changes, where the changes exactly need to be made. So I do not need help at this point of time, but say come next week, if I'm stuck or if I'm working on something else, I'll let folks know. But one thing I would like to request of everyone is if you can provide the reviews early, it would be easier to include the feedback than waiting till API review is done, because API review is going to take some time.
Yeah, and same thing for this KEP, any of the node changes, they'd like to see those early, just so that they can have a chance to fully understand how all of the different enhancements that are going in are kind of interact with each other to make sure there's no regressions there. But yes, thank you for pushing this KEP to alpha. There's a lot of work that went in here, and I think it'll be really beneficial down the line.
Yeah, no problem. Thanks a lot, everyone in the community, like Sebastian, you, Jay, like all of us jumped onto a call last week and to get the approval. So thanks a lot, everyone.
Okay, great. I'm gonna move on to some of the agenda items. Jay, did you add this one?
We had some when we had some questions. So on the host process containers that she was hitting, she's in the Beijing time zone, so I'm kind of just being the merchant here. And I figured maybe we could look at this together if anybody had any idea. It looks like you already looked at it, Mark, but
Yeah, I looked at it and I linked the test config that we use
okay, cool.
to run this. Without seeing the cluster, that might be
Okay.
difficult, but yeah, I did see that Wenli did pass the test args through, and that's what I was suggesting. That's what we had to do.
Yeah. Okay. Well,
So
okay.
I'll have to take another look at this too. Then.
I can tell her to add more data to that issue too. So, okay.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So one thing. No, like, okay, all the test args should just get passed to the EDE test binary itself, but sometimes there's not a direct mapping of what you specify in the prow job to the EDE test args, because this kind of gets translated by the container that's running and do that. We can take a look. Is there I didn't see a Slack thread about this. That might be a good place to start, but yeah, I'll take a deeper look after the meeting.
Okay.
I think we can do to help out.
Let's see, it's a feature skip, Edwin. Okay, yeah.
Yeah, because we did add the feature skipper there, but we do have the test running. Test EDE Windows. Yeah, so we do have that feature skipper. Maybe it's getting skipped between Node OS distros not set to Windows.
Oh, yeah. Okay, I'll leave that.
That's the other possibility,
Yeah,
or probably a likely case.
That's got to be it. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
All right, I'm leaving that in the issue.
Okay. All right, hopefully that addresses that. And then you guys can get your validation.
Yeah, like if someone wants to run that particular test suite explicitly, the feature gate Windows, that should be good enough, right?
Yeah, that should be enough. And make sure that you're running container D from the master branch, not a released version, because you need to have the HCS shim that you need to either have the HCS shim version that understands the annotations that we pass through for the alpha implementation on the CRI calls, or container D that understands the new CRI fields. And both of those are only kind of available if you build from container D or HCS shim from master. But this is a good package to build. We build this out of our, which one? Where is the container D?
So either, okay.
Oh,
So
this references the container D build that we have. So we've updated one of the Kubernetes SIGs projects to have that might be worth highlighting here.
Yeah.
So in SIG-Windows tools now, we have a GitHub action that we have a workflow that will build container D nightly and publish it to, so we build HCS shim from master, we build and container D and ctr.exe from master of container D. And this runs nightly and ends up as a release. And so this release here will get updated every night with the latest build. So this is a good, if you're interested in testing host process containers or just ensuring that there's no regressions in container D for Windows, this is a good container D package to target.
Oh yeah, definitely. Let's put that link in the notes for sure.
Yeah.
Great.
Copy link. And so, yeah, so that will just get updated every night, and you can see in the actions nightly. This, where's the history? Yeah, so this, we don't need to go into the details of this, but that will kind of ease testing. I added this one, Jay. This might be related to what we were just talking about earlier, but I saw this issue just got closed due to inactivity. It looks like there was a PR to address this, but
Oh, yeah, I
it
think
wasn't clear that this is actually addressed.
missing node selector for functioning. I think, yeah, I think I saw this on AWS when I ran EKS with Windows. And I think I fixed it, right? I think I added a selector in this PR.
You fixed it, and then a bunch of people asked in the issue if we could close the issue if your fixes fully address the issue or not. So I just wanted to confirm.
Oh, and I never answered it. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. That patch, I think, it literally adds a node selector. Yeah.
Okay, that's what I thought. I think I pinged here as well.
Okay, sorry. I never look at the.
No problem.
Okay.
Okay, so I'll just leave that closed.
Yeah.
Okay, does anybody else have anything they want to discuss before I guess we jump into Windows node conformance? I think that'll probably take up the rest of the agenda today. Going once, going twice. All right, Jay, do you want to share the screen? Is there anything I should open up for this, or?
Sure. I can share.
All right.
I guess we can maybe make this our start of our pairing stuff. All right, cool.
I'll keep the recording going for this
Okay.
because I think this would be good to have in the recordings for the
Okay.
community meetings.
All right. So where do we put this? A meme reissued it. I closed mine and then we did it in a memes account. There we go. Here it is. So this as is pretty opinionated, but it's, I think, like minimal. I think this is like
I went in and fixed a bunch of spelling and grammar.
oh, thanks, Ross. Great.
Yep. And then I did have one non-spelling grammar item, which
Okay.
was under the OS versions. There was, yeah, it's that one right there.
Okay. Would you like to be a co-author on this with us, by the way?
Sure.
Okay,
That'd be
great.
great.
So I'm gonna commit these and then I'm just gonna like give us your Git. Well, I have it right here, right? So hey, Meme, are you here?
Yeah.
Can you add him? It's Ross, Kirk, Pat.
Yeah, sure.
Give him a push so we can just cool. Great. So okay. And so then this one was, you had a question here, 1909 versus 2004. Is Perry here? Perry was telling me about this too.
Yeah, I said the first thing I said was which versions do we want to support, was my first kind of comment, and what do we consider.
Had
like
that question before I
conformant.
opened the doc.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I just wrote these down because I think we build pause kernels out of them. So theoretically they would all run the same. That was my thinking when I was doing this at Dunkin' Donuts this Saturday. So like, you know, I was a little distracted. So, but I mean, 1909. Yeah, I mean, I don't have a strong opinion on what versions we support. My initial thought was for this initial V0 of this KEP was to kind of broaden the amount of OSs, and then based on what folks said, like the less we have to support, the better, right? So I
I
think
believe 1909 is out of the support lifecycle
okay, cool.
already. So that would have been released in September 2019, and each SAC release has an 18-month support life cycle.
Mhm.
So I think that's already out. So probably shouldn't
Yeah, and then-
explicitly call out that we're supporting.
I've
Right.
always kind of considered like the latest LTSC and then or the one or so two LTSCs and then the latest SAC was always what I've kind of unofficially in my head thought was probably right.
Okay.
That's
Yeah, no,
usually
yeah.
what we've been doing, saying like latest SAC or two latest SACs and latest LTSC. That's probably going to change since there are no more SAC releases, though.
Ah,
Yeah, and
Yeah, I think that was
2004. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
go ahead. No, go ahead.
2004, I believe, is about 2 months away from being end of service. So I don't know the time frame for getting this in, but if we say 2004, and then by the time we're like have all the tests written 2004's end of service, the issue we've had on the rancher side is those AMIs, they just disappear. So we don't want to go through adding all the tests in for all of these things, and then there's no images to actually use to test for them. So that's why I just wanted to get that thought out there preemptively, so we don't end up basically doing a bunch of work that then in 2 months is essentially void.
Yeah.
I feel like there was a bigger issue going from like 2019 upwards because there was a lot of stuff kind of trickling in for sort of 2004 in terms of container support. But I think now you're kind of on the 2022 LTSC. I think most of those issues have kind of gone away for now, and I guess. And so now it's almost like we could almost just say we are only going to conformance against the LTSCs like the last two maybe and forget.
I think it's fair. I think it's fair to do 20H2, but to Ross's point, yes, the 2004 is going to be out of service December 14th. It's basically exactly 3 months from now. And I think it doesn't make much sense to do 2004 at this point. So I think 2 LTSC and 1 SAC may be the right call because 20H2 is going to be available until August 2022.
One kind of question I had about this is, do we think that there's a need to call out which Windows Server versions are actually supported in something like this? Like, people don't say that, different either LTSC or the faster releases of like Ubuntu or anything are conformant or not. Things just work. And I know Windows is different, and I do know that we need to have the pause images, although that is changing as well with the enhanced, I forgot exactly what it's called, but the enhanced compatibility for process isolated containers that Brendan discussed one of the previous meetings. So that will hopefully help improve the story here too. But I'm wondering if there's actually a need to say different OS versions work, especially when there's going to be fewer, like one coming out every 3 years now instead of 6 months.
Would it be easier to instead say like this is what we are not running conformance tests on?
Well,
Probably.
the whole point of the document, it's a good, actually, so this is not, this actually, you're right. So this doc is not about what we, what we test, it's about what conforms. And so it actually could be OS neutral, right? Just the same way that the actual, yeah, we don't sit around and talk about 1809 Ubuntu has node port connectivity. Like, I've never heard anybody say that before.
I think that the one caveat is like the dual stack support for IPv6 workloads is only available, I believe, on 2004 or later. But other than that, it's like usually things work on Windows or don't.
But I think the way this is written, and I'm not at all married to the way this is written, but in the way that this is written, the idea was, we probably need to change deeds from being an approver. It says that that's an API machinery thing, I guess, but
Oh no, deeds is a PRR approver.
Oh, okay, he's gonna review, okay,
Deeds
cool.
is kind of all over the place. And I believe that David has been the PRR reviewer for most of the recent Windows keps as well. So
Okay,
I think I don't know if it would be better or worse to keep him as the PRR reviewer. On one hand, he's getting more and more familiar with the nuances of Windows versus Linux
Yeah.
containers. But on the other hand, it might be better to, spread that across more of the kind of architectural type people.
I feel like being serialized on someone from API machinery is not necessary for this. Because he's a busy man. I mean, that's almost like relying on Liget, right? Like
It's also usually the other reviewer for all the Windows caps.
yeah,
So,
exactly. Yeah. Well, anyways, we can think about that. But like, yeah.
I think PRR review needs to be done irrespective of if he's from API machinery or not. In the sense, PRR has got a separate team, and David Eads is part of it. So
Mhm.
it has got nothing.
Oh, okay. So
but there's,
okay.
I believe, who is it? It's Elena Hashman, David
and then,
Eads, and
then forgot. I think someone from Google. I forgot his name. There are 3 or 4 active.
yeah, there's like 4.
Yeah.
Okay.
But Jay, I think one.
Oh, John Bellameric.
John Bellameric or something.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. John's really busy, but
Yep.
Yeah.
I don't know the other. Okay, we can figure that out later. But anyways, the point is that this is a conformance spec. So I think, Mark, how do people feel about, because you said host process and that's OS specific, but I think that that's covered because
Well, the OS, the host process stuff should work on, like, it'll work on 2019. That's where all of our tests are. So it's,
yeah, well, not only will it work on 2019, but also it's a separate thing. So I separated the host
oh, okay.
from core, right? So it's like, here's the core stuff,
Yeah.
and then this should work anywhere. And then the host process stuff, it's like that's a separate. And I don't know how I feel about the way we've separated these, but just as a theoretical starting point, I'm like, well, you could envision a world where you had a Sonobuli flag where you said Windows conformance, and then you could give it sub options of the different things that you cared about, right? And I put Active Directory and host process in those, but just as examples. But
For like the GMSA testing.
yeah, like, but I mean,
Yeah.
like, so if we were to take that, the structure of this, then we could do what you just said, which is not reference specific versions.
I think we should think this through, Mark. I mean, dual stack is one example. I think we have a couple more examples in networking
Mhm.
where it is OS specific. So if the purpose of the conformance test is to give confidence that if somebody is running a distro, and they feel that all these test cases, whatever, will be are running well. I think in Windows, unlike Linux, it has dependency on OS because the OS version will have some capabilities that the other won't. And this will
Mhm.
continue even beyond 2022, right? So let's say even dual stack, right? Let's say you have a test or something for conformance there, and you tested with 2022, and then you're like, well, my distro is conformant for 2019, 20H2, and every 2022. That's not really the case, right? It is conformant for 2022. It is not conformant for other OS versions. So I think if the purpose of conformance is to give confidence, I think we have to be specific in Windows cases here.
Yeah, I didn't fully read through this yet, and I think I commented in Slack that I'm going to do that this week. But I see that. I can see that go either way. There is a very limited number of Windows operating systems versus Linux distros. So I think it could go either way.
But when here's the counterpoint to that is, so think about it this way, Muzz, like you could talk about operating systems being conformant, but the whole idea of a cluster.
Ravi, I think you were on mute. You went on mute.
Or
at some
Jay,
point.
yeah.
Yo, Jay, sorry, yeah.
How did I go on mute? What?
Everyone went on
Just
mute.
host mute already.
Yeah, I got a message saying the host would like you to speak.
Yeah.
Would you want to be
Yeah.
unmuted?
Same.
I guess nobody agrees with me that the operating system doesn't matter. Okay. All right. So here's the deal. So like, think of it this way, like the purpose of conformance. So you could challenge the premise of that, right? Like you could challenge the idea that the purpose of conformance is to verify that an operating system is correct. The purpose of conformance is to verify that a cluster is conformant to the Kubernetes API specification, right? So at that level, decoupling from the OS might be valuable. It doesn't mean we can't have the version information in this KEP, but I just wanted to bike shed about that for like 10 seconds.
Yeah.
Well, Jay, I think Moz has a point. For example, in OpenShift, we have to be careful about the exact version of Windows being used because there is a patch that we need that's not present in Windows Server 2019. And on some platforms, you have to use one of the SAC releases until, of course, now it doesn't matter because 2022 came out.
Well, that's a good point. So you need this patch, right?
Our
job would be to specify the conformance of your cluster to whatever the behavior is associated with that patch in the context of this KEP, I think.
Sure. I don't think our case really applies here. It's a little special because we're using this hybrid overlay piece inside Windows that requires a feature that was added to the kernel, but from what I understand, there's no way it's going to make its way into 2019 because 2019 is very, the rate of stuff being backported is very slow is what I was told.
So could you verify the thing that you need from that patch without actually saying anything about the operating system itself? Because that I think is the purpose of conformance.
Yeah, I was gonna say, does the patch you need, is it needed for functionality that OpenShift is specifically relying on, or is it needed for like saying that the cluster is conformant? It sounds like to me, just hearing that if OpenShift needs something specific for the way that they're implementing the hybrid overlay networking, I don't know if that's necessarily something that conformance would call out.
Correct. No. I'm not even saying that conformance is a call out. I was just agreeing with Moz that in some cases there could be OS specific stuff that would require us to call out. That's all. I'm not asking for any call out here, but something we need to keep in mind that because the way patches flow in Windows, right? You could end up with an SAC that has a feature that is needed for Kubernetes to work, but
not anymore.
Won't be there. Yeah, not anymore. Yeah, hopefully.
but there will always be cases, Mark. I'm saying, I mean, there will be cases, and I can call out specific cases. And Jay, to your point, right? I mean, yes, you're looking at cluster, and that is it conformant to the Kubernetes API or not? But in some cases, it won't be because of the OS limitation, right? And if that's the case, then the cluster, you're looking at just the cluster level from an API perspective, but the cluster won't be able to support it because the OS doesn't have that functionality.
So maybe
if that makes sense.
Maybe the answer is that as part of this, we actually curate a table that's updated from release to release and with every Windows update and everything else that says these operating systems have been found to, be conformant to this specification. And that would be part of what we maintain in this over time.
Yeah, something like that.
I would like to also point out that because there's not going to be any SAC releases moving forward, the speed of the velocity for having fixes go back or get into Windows Server 2022 is going to be greatly improved.
Oh, that's good news, Mark.
The reasoning is the servicing, the servicing team has these requirements where they won't release a fix to a version of Windows if it's not already present in all versions of Windows released after that. And then there was always some requirements for they call it flighting, but to have the fixes available to customers, to a subset of customers to use. So if not because we had so many different SAC releases and the Windows Server 2019 code base was so old. If there was an issue that was fixed, it was required to be fixed in the most recent SAC release, and then the most recent, and then the previously released SAC release, and so on until it hit Windows Server 2019. But now Windows Server 2022 is going to be the minimum, like the latest version. So that will be the first Windows Server version where the fix will be available. So that we're super excited about that too.
Okay, cool.
Sorry to cut you off if you had anything else you wanted to add, Arvin.
No, so I'm reading, what I'm reading is that soon we'll be able to just say we support Windows Server 2022 and not worry about like kernel versions and things like that, because the fixes we need will automatically keep getting backported.
Yeah,
I think that's the goal. I think that's the goal, but in reality, you know, I could see a lot of cases. That's why I just want to be careful.
But in general, yes.
Yeah.
As long as you are keeping your Windows Server 2022 nodes up to date, then you shouldn't have to worry about that. But if you are running on older ones and not applying the cumulative updates, there may be some drift there.
I think one thing I wanted to add is where should we call out that the conformance test is something that like a particular test suite, it's going to work on a particular version of Windows. The way I'm seeing about it, and I could be wrong, is this should be somewhere within the test. Like, for example, if I'm running the GMSA test or some other test, I would like a particular version of Windows, like list all the nodes that are available, find out the build version that is this particular test can run on. And if the nodes are not having that particular build version, then we need to stop running the test. We need to skip it at that point of time.
Oh, like embed it that.
Hey, I'm gonna drop for SIG node as well. So I'm gonna give you host, Jay.
Okay. Yeah, Robbie. So that I mean, I think that there that goes back to the whole what should the tests do? And I think that the bar here that I kind of started with was that the tests should have it's a Boolean output from the tests, right? As opposed to like a variable thing, and then you can customize the granularity of that Boolean output and what it means by adding other subsuites of verification of things. And then I guess you could presumably see a tool like Sonabuoy or something saying, if a user is running all of their nodes on 1809 and they try to do host process containers, I'm going to blow up or whatever, But I see that as like in the user or the testers, like that's part of their, I feel like a big mistake we've made in Kubernetes is the entire thing of how we skip if OS distro is. I feel like that didn't work out very well. like I feel like that whole thing has to die in a fire at some point. Like what are we going to do when we have 3 operating systems, right?
Yeah, I mean, like
the reason sorry, was mentioning that that skip logic is only for non-conformance tests, by the way. For example, for conformance tests or not conformance tests, we also have the Linux only tag. So we exclude through that tag. The idea is that what Kubernetes decided that there should be no skip logic inside the tests, right?
Yeah.
So there's the compromise that they are tagged as Linux only, that we skip them in our test runs,
Yeah.
But yeah, in a lot of scenarios, which
I mean, the reason that it exists this way today is that we never really figured out how to properly vendor a testing library. Because we were kind of building the end-to-end tests as we were using them, right? So we were kind of just copy and pasting code from different things. And so like, if we were to design the test from scratch today, I don't think we would have sort of had a monolithic testing package and then had bespoke logic in it, right? Like we would have probably thought more about how to generically define what we cared about, in a way that was like container independent and implementation independent. And there's a lot of stuff going, you know what I mean? It's like, so, I mean, I think we've done an okay job with that, but like, actually, I think Ravi's PR is kind of important for that, right? Like the ability to actually define the OS in the container itself is going to actually improve the quality of our tests a lot, I think. But yeah, that's a tricky one. I don't know, Ravi. I don't know what the answer to that is. But if you want, again, like I think if you want to co-author this with us, you're welcome to, right? If you want to add that story, or if you just want to add a comment and like review it, that's totally cool too. I think it's tricky to think about that for me though. I don't know.
So to be clear, Jay, what's the time frame that we are looking at for this? Because I think this release, I will be busy working on the OS, the pod spec, OS tool in the pod spec.
Well, you know me, Ravi, I'm not very patient. So whatever, I mean, let's get it done. I mean, if there's something important that we're missing, let's fix it. But other than that, I'm not going to sit here and like bang down doors to get it into 123, but I feel like we should probably, get everything we care about into this thing and then work out the details as a SIG quickly. And then,
Yeah, at a high level, to me, conformance is something that is at least OS version agnostic in case of Windows. Rest of the tests, so say if it is actually depending on a particular version of Windows or a particular version of containerd or something like that, then perhaps that should not become a conformance test is what I'm thinking.
Yeah, Jace Dumars mentioned this. We talked to him yesterday and it was like, well, he was talking about this distinguished from the idea of like maybe distinguishing conformance, because also that could just start a war if we say conformance, right? Like,
yeah.
Like going with the term operational conformance. So it's rather than having it as like a certified Kubernetes release that it's always going to run, it's more like this is what we would think is like operationally the best way that you can run a cluster, and this is what we test against, kind of.
Yeah. Let's just do that, right? Here we go. It's not conformance anymore.
So I agree with Ravi when he mentioned that it shouldn't depend on the OS version. I think that's a fair point. But in regards to the containerd version, less so. It's a lot easier to update containerd than to update the entire operating system, in my opinion. And additionally, there's another thing that has been bugging me for quite a while. So let's take, for example, GMSA. You actually have to have particular features enabled or set up in order to actually use it. But we still want to include that in the Windows conformance definition, right? Because typically, if you are to somehow run Windows conformance with Sonobuoy or something like that you mentioned in the spec doc, someone would have to know explicitly that they have to enable that or how to set it up.
So if you're talking
So
about the kubelet
basically, it
flag,
depends on a couple of features which might not be enabled.
yeah, there's a kubelet flag
Yeah.
that's been enabled by default since
Especially
1.19.
since a couple of features currently are still in alpha. I think even host.
Claudio, we lose.
Yeah, but for example, host process is still in alpha, right?
Right, but host process
But
isn't required for
we talked
GMSA.
about this in this spec here. Sorry?
I say host process isn't required for GMSA. Like the only thing, as far as I'm aware, with the current GMSA
I know
implementation.
it was an example.
Oh, okay, got it.
I need to drop
Yeah.
off, but I think I'd like to continue the discussion, perhaps on Slack.
It was just an example. It was just an example.
Yeah. Okay, Ravi, just ping us and let me know if you want to help us author this and be on it with us. And also you too, Claudio.
Anyways, I was wondering if we could have some.
Your audio is breaking up, Claudio.
Yeah, I was about to say.
Buddy, your internet is all messed up, Claudio. You have an internet
Sure,
problem.
I think my internet is kind of hiccupy. Yeah.
Yeah. Claudia, let's talk about it later. Just ping me because I think you're offline. Obviously, Ross, please just push a PR up there. And if you want to be an author with us, you're welcome, of course. You're also welcome to be a reviewer if you'd prefer to do that.
Okay.
So, but I mean, I think it's great for us to have different people from different companies doing this. Like, I don't want a person that, you know, pushes this. So yeah. This is a memes repo. So anybody interested in contributing, just send a meme your GitHub and we'll go from there.
Cool.
Perry, can you add the do you want to add the conclusion to that, or do you think we even reached a conclusion on the
I feel like the conclusion was we just need to say what we're not supporting, or just say this is what we test against, and that's it, I think.
all right. You want to push that up or
Yeah.
somewhere? Okay, cool. So I'll tag you on that, and then I feel like we've kind of bled into pairing, so I feel like this probably we can kind of just end with this. But yeah, yeah, and I'm not at all, I'm gonna say this so that people don't freak out about this, because I'm not at all committed to this. Good example. Fine, Windows operational readiness without forcing OS versions, because the non-standard legacy features I think that kind of addresses some of the stuff that folks have been saying about, like, you know, privileged containers and stuff. Like, I think the thing to keep in mind is the core conformance part. I think that's kind of like, we expect this to work anywhere. And I think this is kind of, to me, the most important part. What else? Anybody else? I think most people have dropped off. And me, Ameem, and Perry all work together, and Friedrich. So there's not much point in us going on much further. Friedrich is just hanging out. He's got a new job. Claudio's internet doesn't work.
So Jay, how much of that's already implemented of this test suite?
Most of the core stuff is. The only stuff that's not implemented is, so I suggested these, but these aren't implemented. I thought people would like argue with me about these, but nobody's complained about these, either because nobody's read them yet or because, but like, I feel like we've hit things, me and Perry have hit stuff where container D is weird on Windows and logs get accumulated and stuff sometimes. And I feel like the service proxy on Windows is not as well exercised. And so I would like to have, like, especially when you think of large clusters, right? Like 100 node Windows cluster, if someone were to ever make one, I think it would be, I think the reason I think it's important to have these service tests in place is that we can say like, look, okay, if for some reason the Windows kube proxy doesn't support 10,000 services, then if somebody was to try to run 1,000 node cluster, these tests would fail. And that would give us a good way to say you can't run a Windows cluster of greater than this size. Because I don't think any of us really knows how all this HNS kube proxy stuff works at scale. So
I mean, I can tell you from a 100 node cluster, it's not pretty.
yeah,
But that's also running like a, I mean, that's, I think it was like 116, 117 Kubernetes, but it just was not, it was not pretty. It was
yeah,
also all bare metal, of course, giant, mega nodes, which doesn't help anything.
yeah.
I mean, have we ever looked at like scale testing in the SIG-Windows?
No.
No.
Well, because I think
We've mentioned it a couple of times, but it's never really gone on anyone's like radar, I think.
Because I think that's the next step after conformance is taking the conformance, building tests and scaling up with the conformance test until we hit a point where something breaks and then saying, documenting that and then just leaving it there. And it's not something we should have to repeat too often either, because Windows is slow in terms of development.
yeah,
Expensive.
Just log into someone else's account so it goes into their.
Just put it under Microsoft. They're not going to pay for it, are they?
yeah. I mean, that's part of what I was thinking is that we don't do this for Linux, but it's like there's not really much point doing it for Linux because we know that Linux, the way that they do service proxying in Linux kind of scales to hundreds of thousands of pods. But so since Windows service load balancing is as deeply hardened as that of Linux, also scalability, which limit node sizes Windows clusters put in place to ensure that
Claudia's wrote some of what you need, I think. Jay.
yeah. Okay. Looking on Zoom.
Yeah, just put 50 pods on a single Windows node should be okay.
Okay. 50 pods on a node. But I don't think that that's the. Claudio, I wish you were here so I could talk to you right now, but
I'm back too. Hi.
Hello.
I'm still here. I got better.
Make sure you watch this back just so you can hear what you sound like. it's very sporadic.
Yeah, I'm sorry. Yeah.
It's all right.
back and forth. So, yeah, I think that for me, I'm not too worried about the pod rotation. I'm more worried about the service load balancing part. Because I've always seen that that's the thing that breaks, right? Like it's that host local load balancing stuff that never seems to work properly. But yeah, I think it's fair if you want to say 50 pods. I don't remember what did we say here? So
So I missed a whole bunch, but there was a recent effort to define a bunch of SLOs and SLIs for Kubernetes. And for Linux, they define the number of pods that can run on a node based on the number of cores. So I think that they say it's
yeah,
a minimum, or it's the max of some number, or like I think it's 10 times the number of cores. It might be helpful to define that in that regard as well.
Is that SIG scalability you've come out with those?
Yes, I believe so.
Yeah,
So-
I read that right recently. I need to reread again, but might be worth trying to get something in for Windows on that scalability targets.
yeah. So
Yeah, yeah, definitely.
So I think you can run, yeah, so it's like I didn't put anything per core because I'm assuming that even a minimal cluster should be able to run 10 containers. And so then the question winds up being, can you load balance, if you have 100 nodes, can you load balance 1,000 pods behind those 100 nodes? I wasn't.
They did do, I think, like, I'll try and link to those two. They did do like they did kind of break it up and say these were cluster wide like goals and these were node wide goals. Might be good to do something like that. Like on Windows, the more, I mean, as always, but even more on Windows, the more stuff you have running on any node, it stresses things like network programming more so than on Linux, if that
Yeah,
needs to happen on the node. But
yeah, so
yeah, I think we should just try and move in the direction that SIG scalability is using for how they define some of their like metrics or recommendations.
well, but here's the thing though. The one thing here is I intentionally steered away from scalability because I think the purpose, what I was thinking the purpose was here is to define functionality. So by running 10 pods behind a cluster IP, you're not really saying much about scale. But what you are saying is that the service proxy is not fundamentally broken in some way, right? And that was kind of where I was going with this, because see, the minute you get into performance, right? Like now you're having all sorts of arguments that are not about the functionality of things, but are about like, well, you know, like stupid, like they're just, there's these weird stupid arguments you get into that what's a core, right? At some point you have to have that debate, right? Like, and it's like that's a tough one to have, right? Like so I'm not saying we shouldn't do that, but I'm saying that like when I originally wrote this, I specifically did not want to address scale in that sense, right? Simply because I don't know if we're capable of doing that in the scope of this KEP. I don't know. I'm not saying.
I guess, yeah, I could see all of that. I missed some of it. I think if we want to say, like, in order to make sure things are working, like what you said, we want to have the test case at least cover this minimum scenario, but not necessarily talk for how this scales. I'm completely fine with that. That makes sense.
Yeah. Yeah, it's like basic, it's like, and it's like my fault because I said I should have said like basic functionality, concurrent functionality, right? It's like that's the idea, right?
Yeah, you need to be able to have a cluster with more than one node and make sure it works, essentially.
Yeah, right. We scale targets as conformance as this KEP concerns itself with standardizing
Just
API
like a minimal
minimal
functional tests or something.
functionality required for an operation. That said, some level of currency and what would the word be? Repetition is required to verify that it's capable.
That makes sense.
Performance. In quotes. I can't think of a better way to say it right now, but I guess that's a good start, right?
Mhm.
Okay, yeah, that's it. Yeah.
It's kind of like you want the performance minimums, right? And not worrying about like what we think it's going to go to the maximums. We just want to know minimum.
Yeah. Yeah, right. Like you need, load balancing needs to work. And in order to know load balancing works, you need to at least load balance to more than one thing,
Yeah,
Like-
yeah, definitely.
So all right, I think okay, cool. So I think we got enough feedback that we can do some more cleanup. And then
The one thing I was just, as we were all talking, I was thinking about was we started talking about minimum like patch level and stuff. Do we as SIG-Windows want to come up with a list of patches that we say we're not, it's not conformant, or at least operationally conformant if you don't have this minimum like OS patch or not, like KBs or something? I don't know how that all works anymore, but
I wonder if we want to not put a value in there, but say like, you
do we
must
want to
have
check that things are there? Like say there's a certain patch for 2022 that we know is, I don't know, fixing a CVE or something like that. We want to say you need to make sure you have this.
Yeah, the other one
I
I
almost
can
want
think
to
of-
say you must adopt like the cumulative updates within 3 months or something
Yeah.
like that.
I think providing best practices is probably better than like hard coding a specific patch. And then also like the February 2019 patch? Like that's probably the only one for server 2019 that I can think of where we need to make sure they have it, because if they don't have that, it's going to be horribly broken.
yeah.
Or you need to hard code the KBs for the image tags. Yeah, that was
Right.
kind of a disaster.
Yeah.
But yeah, I'm kind of inclined to just say like you must adopt the security patches within this time limit, and that's more just good best practices all around.
Yeah,
Mhm.
and we can always wrap some like, in today's current whatever, with CVs popping all the time, especially 0 days. Like I think 3 months is generous.
Yeah.
Like if you're missing 3 months, that's a problem. It's not our problem.
Mhm.
Yeah. Yeah, I think this whole thing needs a new section. So maybe y'all can talk about that, like how you want to section that and how you want to structure this, because obviously I don't think it would fit into the way I started it. Maybe this needs to be moved out or something. And I wonder whether we should consider that being like a thing that we say we're going to curate as part of this KEP, because it's going to change over time, right? So it's not part of the specification so much as it is like an ongoing thing that makes the specification valuable, is that now we have a binary way of saying these things actually work or not, and then you'll curate that list of data, and then maybe where we curate that list of data is part of this KEP as well, right? So like, okay, we'll manage a README file in SIG-Windows, blah, 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 that will have up-to-date information about these blah, blah, blah things.
I think it'd be pretty neat to have a test that validates that too. Like to
Mhm.
eventually get like patch version on your node.
Yeah, that's kind of what I was thinking.
Oh yeah, like have it directly in E2E. Yeah. Yeah, I mean that
At least with like a node conformance label or something.
Yeah, we did that for the policy stuff. We did that. Like we were like, okay, here's how the tests are going to work that do this, right? Like, And then,
Mhm.
and that took a long time to implement though. That took us 1.5 years to get that stuff working in Prowl properly and merged. But once it was in, it was nice. So I think it would be good to specify the goals, the runtime goals. But I think we should be honest when we do that because we're so strapped for cycles. You know, in SIG Network, it was doable because SIG Network has a lot of contributors. We don't have a lot of contributors. So I think we should be careful when we write this KEP about like what we're committing to, right?
True.
In terms of how much we can maintain in terms of CI.
True. Yep.
But yeah, I think it'd be cool.
I think somebody was
Go on.
posting some stuff in chat.
Oh,
Yeah, it's Claudio. I gotta run, guys. I'll catch you tomorrow, Jay, and I'll talk to you all next week.
yeah, all right.
Oh, Claudio was wondering if we should specify a minimum container D version.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a good idea.
And it's should be the one that's not yet released.
Yeah. Yeah, Claudio, add yourself either as an just push some commits to this and just give us your GitHub, or I think we have it. It's Claudio Blue. And just push some commits up for this if you want. And if you want, add yourself as a reviewer. If you don't want to be an author on it, just if you want to add yourself as a reviewer, then you know that would be cool too.
Yeah, I'll take a look too.
I think Mark, you already said you're going to be a reviewer though. So
Oh, I don't know if I said that. I think you guys just told me, and I'm fine with that.
I think yeah, something happened. So either you or James, we were like, who wants to be on this? And then I think one of you all was like, well, somebody's got to review this thing.
Maybe
so.
I was out, so James volunteered me. I'm fine with that though.
Okay. All right. Well, I think that's good. Thanks everybody for looking at this.
Like one question I have, like, is this at one point wasn't this Windows node conformance? Do we need, I mean, we should probably bring this up to SIG node at some point too.
I think we got rid of the word conformance while you were gone.
Or
So-
node, you mean the node because it's still operational readiness.
Because we realized that if we say the word conformance, everybody's going to be mad at us. So like,
And everybody has a different idea of what they think conformance means.
yeah. So we actually, and it's because that's also partially from talking to Jace Dumars about this yesterday. He mentioned the same thing. And the idea being that like, well, maybe if we can get this working at the Windows level, we can start to broaden the types of certifications we have for Kubernetes so that we're not serialized on this one definition of conformance, because it's kind of starting to break that whole model, right? Like,
Well, yeah, and like conformance is, to me, is meant to prevent vendor lock-in. It's like, and that's the only thing that it's meant to do. And
yeah,
like internally here, everybody says, oh, did you run the conformance tests? And I always have to, well, that just like sets me off. And I'm like,
Yeah.
no, you need to ask if they ran the appropriate E to E tests, because conformance tests don't necessarily test what you think they do.
yeah,
We've had some cases where the Windows team almost released a patch and they're like, we ran conformance tests and it worked. And we're like, well, did you actually run the tests that test the deep networking functionality?
yeah.
Most of those aren't conformance tests.
I just
And-
yelled at somebody for that the other day because they're like, no, all the kube proxy tests pass. And I'm like, yeah, because you're probably scheduling them all to the Linux node. Yeah, like, you know, like,
Yeah, so I think it's probably a good idea to differentiate this and come up with a different thing, because like conformance definitely has its place.
yeah,
And I think it's like that's kind of core to the CNCF mission. So like I don't want to side skirt that at all, even though it's kind of hard to prevent vendor lock-in when only one vendor can patch the OS that you're running on. But there's that.
well, you know, it's like, you know, Windows like has this, yeah, like, so a Windows cluster that has Linux nodes on it should pass conformance, and that has meaning, right? And I think that that's what the conformance definition is. It's telling you that those 300 or so tests pass, some of which are Linux specific, right? And
Mhm.
it's always going to be what that means. And so we're not skirting it. What we're just saying is that, like, in addition to passing conformance, which tells you a lot, there's also this other suite of tests that tells you that you're ready to run Windows workloads, and that's a significant enough thing that it's an upstream thing, you know.
Yeah, definitely.
And I guess we should say that, right? Like, do we say? I don't know.
I think we should. I think we should probably be pretty careful about what we put in there, because I think anything we say is gonna cause some people to go crazy.
Yeah, you know, like, it's like we really got to soften this. Like, it's like the first sentence I have here is how we're differentiating things. And I should really just not, I should just say operational readiness for running Windows workloads is a continuous.
Like maybe we should just say the goal of this is to help give a signal that your Windows, like that your cluster can support Windows nodes.
Yeah.
Or something like that. And then I think we can say, like, this is intentionally not conformance, because conformance is meant to prevent vendor lock, and this is meant to provide additional, like, test or operational coverage.
Support running traditional Windows workloads as this needing to run Windows workloads on clusters provided by different vendors with potentially different underlying CNI, CRI, or other patient details. Something like that, right?
With that being said, though, isn't Sonobuoy's kind of express purpose to validate conformance?
Well, so Sonobuoy is supposed to be a pluggable sort of library for for running a battery of, like, informing tests on your cluster. And I think the sort of poster use kit, the quintessential usage of it is certified conformance.
Okay.
You know, but well, you know, we're good friends with Vlad over here, and you know, we can he's definitely, I mean, we're all in the business of making Sonobuoy capable of doing more than that, but I mean, he's certainly not opposed to that, right? I mean, certified conformance is that's just one of the use. Like, normally when I run Sonobuoy, I use E2E focus equals SIG network or something, or SIG-Windows, you know? So, so yeah, but I mean, it's a good point. Like, I think that has to be clarified in Sonobuoy, that, like, this, you know, and I think actually in the way that I implemented the Sonobuoy example, I think I kind of broke the rule that I just said here, because see, I said Windows conformance. I really should have said something else. Conformance. Gosh. Windows core, standardizing core. You can just, oh my God, there's so many of these I have to replace now. But, like, I can just do this while y'all go get lunch or whatever. But, like, I'm gonna update that Sonobui thing as well. Claudio's going to be bad at me. I proposed that we just rely on pause image, and I know he likes that HTTPD image. Or
You don't want to use the IIS image that takes 15 minutes to pull.
oh, yeah. Yeah, I'm just updating all these. So I'm gonna go down to my Sonobui here, and I'm gonna finally, here I am. So it's like, Sonobui plugin install, and we could do like Windows, right? And then we can run it. And so like, yeah, this would be like a plugin, right? And like, we could curate this plugin as part of SIG-Windows, or we could, maybe they would want to curate it as part of the Sonobui folks. I don't know. That's,
We can figure that out later.
okay, so that's cleaned up. So I've removed a lot of the conformance stuff. Well, thanks, Mark, for rejoining, and Ross and everyone. So everyone feel free to mob on it and just get involved. Where's Claudio? Let's sync up later this week, Claudio. I'll be around. Once you get
I missed that. Is he having AV issues?
his audio is not working. All right. Anything else anybody wants to go through? Friedrich, you got anything? No, just hanging in there. All right. Cool. I'm gonna jump. I'm gonna get something to eat, and then we'll sync up. We'll be around later. See you, folks.
Bye.
See you, everyone.